Reverend William Huffman prayed with the extraterrestrial being moments before it passed away, while the breath was still in its lungs. This is Paranormal Christian. Let's tell stories. One of the most famous accounts of a UFO crash happened near Cape Girardeau, Missouri, which is only about an hour and a half from where I live. It was 1941, and this was about 6 years before the famous Roswell account in New Mexico in 1947. It was the middle of the night in Chaffee, Missouri, west of Cape Girardeau, just a few miles, when Reverend William Huffman, a Southern Baptist minister, got a call in the middle of the night from the local sheriff. The sheriff shared with Reverend Huffman that there had been a terrible plane crash, and he asked the Reverend if he would come and pray with the survivors that looked like they were not going to survive. Reverend Huffman gathered his things as quickly as he could and drove to the site of the crash. When he got to the site of the crash, he did not find the crash of a traditional airplane. There were local law enforcement on the scene and a few local residents that had heard or seen the crash, maybe were awakened by the crash, maybe some farmers that had come out of their homes to gather in the area. And what Reverend Huffman saw was a silver disc-shaped craft that had been broken on impact. There on the ground were three bodies that were 3.5 to 4 foot tall, with very large heads, big black eyes, very thin arms and fingers, completely hairless. 2 of the bodies were obviously already dead. The third body was still breathing. This being, this creature, this humanoid alien from somewhere else still had life in its body. The Reverend, obviously shaken, did as the sheriff had asked him to do. And he prayed over the bodies and prayed with this last surviving being before the being passed away. Within moments, the scene changed very quickly as lots of Army personnel showed up and government officials showed up. They began to swear all of the local law enforcement to secrecy and all of the residents that were present. None of this information was ever exposed until the year 2000, when Reverend Huffman's granddaughter, now very old, Charlotte Mann, decided to share the story that her grandmother had shared on her grandmother's deathbed. Reverend Huffman had already been gone for quite some time. He had entrusted this story to his wife, and his wife, on her deathbed, in her dying moments, decided she had to tell somebody. And she shared it with her granddaughter, Charlotte Mann. She said that this had bothered Reverend Huffman for many, many years, that he was terribly shaken over the account and had to share it with someone, and shared it with his wife. Now people that had the reports of an airplane crash, they could connect the physical facts of an airplane crash that happened, but now everyone was getting a very different story than the natural version that had been reported by the government and by the local law enforcement after the government told them to change their story. Do I have any way of knowing if this is true? Nope, not a clue. I have no idea, and it's up to you, if you're interested, to research the evidence that does exist, to research the facts, and to decide for yourself. I'll say that it is very, very interesting in light of the fact that our Pentagon is now declassifying the UFO files, that they're admitting that there is a branch of government that was actually dedicated to research these things. If they didn't believe there was anything to it, they wouldn't be paying anybody to research it. And so our government has now admitted from 2017 to present, and then if you're watching any of this, you know in the last month there's now a dedicated website, and the Pentagon is releasing photos and videos and reports regularly. Every few weeks they're giving us more to look at, and the government is now saying, you know, these were not weather balloons that crashed. These were not man-made airplanes that crashed. There are crafts that we cannot trace to any human origin. We don't know what we're seeing in the sky. We only know what our trained pilots, what our astronauts, what our high-ranking government officials gave eyewitness to that they saw, and that it's up to the public. And so I add to that this very popular story about a UFO crash close to home for us in Cape Girardeau in 1941. What kind of stories do you have? Have you ever seen a UFO? Have you ever seen a flying saucer, a spaceship, an alien craft? A friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, he and his father in the 1980s saw something over the field at their farm, only about 40 foot off the ground. I'll be sharing that real soon as well. I might even have him come in to tell it. Anyway, we want to hear your story, and we want to hear your thoughts on these stories. Would you subscribe and follow us? Would you visit paranormalchristian.com? Would you click the contact page, fill out the form, send us your experience, and send us your permission to share your story with our audience here. So keep the stories coming and keep them PC.